But you could use a regular pencil. I like colored pencil just because it kind of disappears under here. Okay, and I'm not going to worry too much about the color or anything. I just want to get my point across here with this. All right, so look, here's one thing that I'll do a lot, especially if it's graphite. I'll spritz it, and I'll usually let it dry. Okay, now the reason I usually do that, especially with graphite, is because I think we talked about this.
This is graphite?
No, that's a.
It's just a
But especially if it's graphite, because I don't want the graphite to smear. This stuff doesn't smear a whole lot. But if I do it with graphite, it'll kind of suck the paper or suck the pencil into paper a little bit and sort of fix it so it won't smear so much. Also, if you're doing this, I wouldn't go with a super soft pencil because it'll smear. A lot of times I'll use a, what do you call it? An HB, right? Or maybe a 2B, but I usually won't go past a 2B. Okay. So now I have color under here. So I'm gonna go, again, I talked about this, but I'm gonna go probably fairly straight in here because I got this under. And what you're gonna see here is because it's picking up all the value of what's underneath it, it'll immediately start to feel like a painting, basically. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Which is a really nice way to work. And I'm gonna leave the edges a little more. I left that deliberately because it felt like it was a little backlit. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And the thing I like about this, there's a couple of reasons. It gets me going very quickly. And it looks like something very quickly. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm not going through that whole period of like it looking like crap. Which can, you know, sometimes it... You see what I mean though? How it's already just picking up all that value? It's just kind of a nice thing, right? And I'm gonna take this, let's try this. Okay. I'm going to leave the top part of it a little bit open. I'm going to leave a little of that warmth under it too. I like that. Get a little bit right here. And let's get a little of this in here. Let's get a little of this first. Now, if there's too much water in there, I'll just pull it out. This side feels pretty good. This side feels a little much. Let's go here. I want a little of that. Let's get a little of this. Add a little of this. I'm hoping it'll darken it up a little here. Now I'm going to try something here in a minute. So what I'm trying to do here is to start what we talked about before, where I'm starting to try and get a little bit of value without necessarily pushing the color up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or without just dulling out all the color. A little pinky in there. Now, there's a bunch of things. I'm going to try this. If I don't like it, I'll pull it out. And again, I like to build. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I like to build things. I don't like to just go in real hard with it right off the bat. And why am I using purple? It's that, and also, yeah, the yellow is a complement. So I know I can come in here with some purple and kind of knock it around and get some other color going on here, which we've talked a lot about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is getting different things in here. And it's transparent, so it's going to sit. Yeah, that's good. It's going to sit in here. Kind of nice. So I'm going to say that he's lit over here. I'm even going to put a little in here. Just a dark in there. A little too mustachy. I like it. And I'm going to even put a little bit up here. In that, where he catch some shadow. See how this is just right here using this little purple? It's a little nicer than if I just went in and dulled this out. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, one of the reasons I like using whether it's watercolor or it's, whatever you call it, gouache, whatever, and I'll build it up transparently like this. Part of the reason I do that, I like that, is because I can kind of keep color really fresh. Because I can lay like a fairly pure yellow over here, but the yellow underneath, or the purple here, but the yellow is going to knock it down. Does that make sense? So it's going to keep color in it without it going dull, but it's doing the same thing as if I, what do you call that? If I mix it on my palette's going to get a little more, it's going to get a little duller. And I'm only getting it wet up to the edge of where I want it to go.
No, sorry.
You heard what?
My bone's cracking.
You're a little young for bones cracking, aren't you?
We're all gonna crack our bones.
Let's try and grab some
I
of this.
It's no longer illustration. Looks like one of the
Usually it's worse.
Now I'm going to soften this edge here. I don't like that hard edge. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just giving it like maybe it has a naturalistic background. And let's go more of this again. And more of this. And I could introduce a few other things in there if I wanted to. Now, another thing, if I had, I don't even know if I need to have it in here, but let's see if I can get away with this. I don't know if I can. So what I do a lot with this kind of thing is it's kind of working. Is if there was a sky above them, some of this white around here can get a little bit bluish. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I can let it mix into here a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of nice. See it? It's a little subtle thing, but it's nice. Now, I could also do that with a pretty heavy yellow, but I don't think it'll show up enough with all that green. So I'm starting to get a little bit of a reflected light into his lit fur. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah.
And especially if I put it it's probably enough. Yeah, that's not too bad. Especially if I have like up here. If I speak to it and I got some blue up here and there was a sky or something, then see how it starts to make sense? Does that make sense? I don't necessarily have to show it here because you just kind of know it feels like he's outside a little bit. But I could start to indicate that maybe there's a sky out there. And then I have an excuse for all this. And then, so now I'd have to come in here and start to another thing. I want to keep that nose pretty dark. And I keep having to go back in and reinforce the nostrils here, which I'll have to do again. And then here again. And then what I would do is start to come in here and build. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to start looking, I would start looking at where are my shadow areas. And start building around that. The nice thing is that your values are already started because it was in the drawing, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And like here, that snout needs to be a little more prominent. So start to get this side of the face to go a little darker. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have to let it dry a little bit. I'm not sure where I am here. And then, so let's say everybody gets that, right? Do you see how quickly I can create something because I already have the value underneath it? Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so hang on. I could come, now, sometimes I use pencil, sometimes I don't, okay? But what I could do here is I could probably, it's not quite light enough. So if it was a lighter pencil, I can get some nice blue popping on his nose, right? Or like if I was, I could also go, there's a lot of green in this environment. This looks pretty good. So we could probably even get away with it here, probably. I already got some on it, so it's getting tricky. You know, I could pop a little reflected light in his eyes right there. You see that? That gives him a little sparkle, right? And then I'm gonna go in here and go back here. Only this time I'm gonna go. And I want some warmth in here because inside that nostril is probably gonna be some warmth. And that's a little better. And maybe I could even give him a little. See how we're starting to build them? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing I could do later, I don't think it'll show up on here. And I could do it with this too. It would need to probably be a little darker. I could come in here on his fur and pop a little of that green in here, okay? Because it's a very lit environment, right? I could come in here some places if it was a little darker. Yeah, you can't really see it here. And I could pop a few hairs that are lighter, right? I don't usually go to white for these things. Once in a while I might. But I would have built this up quite a ways before I started any of that. Okay, if I'm gonna do any pencil at all, then it's gonna be way later. You know, when I got everything sort of set up. This is basically a simple block in, and now I'd have to start building my values, right? But I'm gonna build them really pretty, I like to build them up, okay? I don't like to just jump in. I think his nose could have a little bit of a, let's see if we can do it with it. Give him a little cast shadow on his nose. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then if I go, that's a little strong, then I'll just knock it down. I'll put another wash over it and knock it down. So I'm not that worried about it, okay? That's the thing that people do with watercolors, they get all uptight about it because they think everything's, you know, doom and gloom with it, and it's not. Yeah, we start building some of these values. So what happens is I sort of start losing a little bit of my underdrawing, and I can start to rebuild it with my values, right? Now I don't want to put too much furry stuff. I want to do big ideas first, and then I can build some of these furry ideas, because I don't want it all over the place. Does that make sense? So do you guys understand the value of doing it this way?
Yes.
It's actually a really nice way to work. Okay, I do it in all different kinds of ways. I do it with watercolor. I do it with acrylic. Do it with oil. You know, do it with anything. But you see how when we put that wash over, it's like boom, instant painting, which is really nice. Okay, because it's just gets you a. One thing I might do here, and I probably again do this later. And maybe
So
a
do
little.
you recommend always putting value first?
It's up to you. It's another technique. That's the way I look at it. So I put some of this here. Now the reason I'm putting that there and I'm reinforcing it is because it'll start to give it that sort of backlit core coming around right here, because it'll basically, that's what's happening right here. It's almost like the whole interior becomes like a core, and then this becomes light. Does that make sense? So in order for me to push that, I'd probably have to come back in. And I don't go this linear this fast. I always start building up just with value like that or whatever, right? Just with big areas of value or whatever. You know, and then after a while I'll stand back. And even this, I like that little bluish quality in there. It's just nice. It gives it something else to play off of. And then maybe I can come in here and reinforce a few hairs here and there. Because he was really furry. And his fur just kind of went everywhere. It was kind of cool. And then there was some that came here. And then,
Probably like schizophrenic or something.
yeah, they've identified as something like that. Or bipolar or something. Okay, so I can come in here opaque. And I can come in here and start adding a few little things in here. Right? I can also go, let's grab. And again, if I had this already built, let's see how many this is going to show. Yeah. I could start to light him a little bit. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I could start to come in here and get some nice, this would be my last pass. See how that's starting to pop a little bit? And it'll sink down a little bit. So that's just what gouache does. So there might be, you know, and then he had some like little stray hairs like here. It would pop over. The nice thing about this is now I can pop over things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like here, over his mouth, over all this. I could come in here and I could pop some highlights out of here. You can see, and it starts to get a nice little random little thing going on. And even here, like I can break these borders onto the background, which is nice. Like do that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we've barely done anything. Let's get a little, let's do this. Yeah, give him a little highlight. I could probably get one in here. Yeah, get a little sparkle in his eyes, right? So anywhere, you know, what I try to do is I try and keep this where I'm not, you know, relying on that, but it's nice to have it. So I tend to usually mostly gouache or something like that. I don't use that much pencil for this kind of thing. Yeah, doesn't have, see, this, like, colored pencil works real, okay, so let's look at this. This will probably work fine. Let's take this one. And down here, I can kind of warm up underneath his nose a little bit, because the ground would be here, throwing up some warm bounce light. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty good, huh?
Well, yeah,
Sounds like.
Yeah,
or reflected light or same thing.
it's bounce light.
Yeah.
Or reflected light, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and I could get a little warmth going on in there. That's not the color I like.
They don't show up that much if there's not enough contrast under.
Yeah, this usually does. I just don't have my whole bag here. That is better. I just want to warm it up under there. See that? And then I probably knock in a little more of the dark value again. You know, and pull, keep going back and forth. Okay, until I build it all up to where I want it to be. So let's see one more thing. I can also put that little line they get down the middle of their nose. That's good. I want to cover up some of that too. I don't want too much of it. And then a really dark, hopefully right here. But that's basically Grisaille, okay? You're starting with a full value. When you wash that color over, this is like, boom, instant painting, okay? And, I mean, I spent probably 10 minutes making that little drawing. Personally, I don't sit around and like worry about the underdrawing. Like I don't sit there and go, ooh, now I'm gonna use it for the underdrawing. I'm gonna be all precious about how I do it. I'm not gonna do that. I just do it nice and loose. And I love all that loose value and drawing underneath it. That's basically how I work when I'm doing this kind of thing. If I'm doing like children's booky kind of stuff, that's how I work. I'm real loose with the pencil and everything, and I add value here and there and things like that. I'm not really thinking about it that much. And then when I start to wash my watercolor over it, it instantly starts looking like a painting, which is really nice.